My cheating wife stole my credit card. The next day, I saw the bill, $53,000 in jewelry and a trip. On Monday, she texted me, "Love the gifts. ATM." I smiled, because the card she used. The police came for the greedy one. Look, I've had some pretty awful days in my 34 years on this godforsaken planet. There was that time in college when I realized I'd been studying for the wrong exam for 3 days straight. Then there was the day I found out my childhood dog had been sent to a farm when I was 8. Spoiler alert, there was no farm. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the cosmic sucker punch that landed in my inbox on a random Tuesday afternoon while I was elbow deep in a clogged sink at the Henderson residence, wondering why people think it's totally normal to flush an entire rotisserie chicken down the toilet. My phone buzzed. I figured it was another spam call about my car's extended warranty. You know, for the 2003 Honda Civic I sold 6 years ago. But no, this was special. This was Bank of America, coming in hot with a fraud alert that made my heart do that thing where it forgets how to beat properly for a solid 10 seconds. You know that tiny heart attack you get when your card declines at Starbucks because you forgot you bought gas that morning? Yeah, multiply that feeling by approximately 53,000. Add a dash of pure existential dread, and you'll get somewhere close to what I experienced when I opened my credit card statement. $53,000. In one day? One single day. I had to read it 3 times because my brain literally refused to process that number. I make decent money as a plumber. Okay, a really good plumber who owns his own business. But I'm not exactly swimming in Scrooge McDuck money vaults. I'm more of a hey, I can afford the good toilet paper and occasionally splurge on name-brand cereal kind of guy. So seeing a charge that could literally buy a decent used car, or pay for a semester at a state college, or fund a small yacht heist, was just a bit outside my normal spending patterns. But here's where it gets truly spectacular in the worst possible way. The charges weren't random. Oh no, that would have been too simple, too easy to dismiss as actual fraud from some hacker in Russia named Vladimir who really wanted to treat himself. These charges were specific, painfully, deliberately specific. Cartier, $3,200. Because apparently, someone needed a love bracelet to demonstrate affection, and Hallmark cards just weren't cutting it anymore. Tiffany & Company, $4,800. I didn't even know you could spend that much at Tiffany's without buying the actual store. Le Spa Marseille, $1,800. For what, I can only assume, was a massage performed by angels using oils blessed by the Pope himself. Air France, round trip to Paris. First class, naturally, because why slum it in business when you're spending someone else's money? $23,000. I've flown to Paris exactly never in my entire life. But hey, at least someone was living their best Emily in Paris fantasy. Louis Vuitton, $9,000. I don't even want to know what costs $9,000 at Louis Vuitton. A bag? A very small, very pretentious bag that probably fits a single tube of lipstick and the shattered dreams of responsible financial planning? The list went on, and on, and on. It was like watching a TikTok compilation of things rich people buy that make no sense. Except this wasn't entertainment. This was my actual life imploding in real time while I stood in someone's bathroom holding a plunger. I sat down on the Henderson's toilet, lid closed, obviously. I'm not an animal. And just stared at my phone. My hands were shaking. Not the angry kind of shaking, not yet. This was the pre-angry shaking. The kind of shaking that happens when your brain is still trying to compute whether you're living in reality or if you've accidentally slipped into some nightmare dimension where money just evaporates from your account like water in the Arizona sun. Then I saw it. The text message. The beautiful, incriminating, absolutely gloriously stupid text message that appeared on my screen at exactly 3:47 p.m., time-stamped and preserved for all eternity like a fly in amber or evidence in a federal fraud case. Love the gifts, ATM Red Heart. ATM, not babe, not honey, not Callum. You're the love of my life, and I appreciate everything you do. Not even, hey, thanks for the random 5-figure shopping spree that definitely seems normal and not at all suspicious. No. ATM, automated teller machine, cash dispenser, money fountain, human-shaped bank account. My wife. Well, technically my soon-to-be ex-wife, though she didn't know that yet, had just spent enough money to buy a decent sedan on jewelry, spa treatments, and a spontaneous trip to Paris, and then had the audacity, the sheer unmitigated gall, to text me a heart emoji and call me a machine. Not even a fun machine, like a motorcycle or a really good espresso maker. No, I was an ATM. A thing. A device that exists solely to dispense cash when you punch in the right code. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone across the Hendersons' very nice subway tile bathroom that I'd installed myself last year. Instead, I smiled. I actually smiled, which probably would have looked deeply disturbing to anyone walking by. But thankfully the Hendersons were at work and their cat didn't seem particularly concerned with my mental state. I smiled because I knew something that Tessa, in all her Louis Vuitton toting, Cartier-wearing, Paris-jetting glory, didn't know. Something that was about to turn her very expensive little shopping spree into the world's most regrettable retail therapy session. The card she used? It wasn't my personal card. It wasn't the joint account we'd set up when we got married. The one I'd stupidly given her full access to because I was young and in love and apparently brain dead. No, this card was special. This card was my business card. The one connected to Ridgeway Innovations, my plumbing and HVAC company. The one that's registered as a corporate entity. The one that handles government contracts and commercial accounts. The one that's legally protected under about 17 different federal and state laws. Which meant that my darling wife hadn't just robbed me. She hadn't just maxed out a credit card or made some questionable financial decisions. No, she'd committed corporate fraud. She'd stolen from a registered business. She'd used company funds for personal expenses, which, fun fact, is a federal crime that the IRS takes very, very seriously. And I was about to make her regret every single purchase, every single spa treatment, every single croissant she ate in Paris, and most importantly, every single time she ever called me an ATM. I stood up from that toilet, looked at myself in the Henderson's mirror, a bit disheveled, still wearing my work coveralls with Ridgeway Innovations embroidered on the chest, plunger in hand like some blue-collar warrior, and I made a promise to myself. This wasn't going to end with a shouting match. This wasn't going to end with tears and couples therapy and some mediator asking us to find common ground. This wasn't even going to end with a simple divorce where we split everything 50-50 and went our separate ways. This was going to end with handcuffs, legal documents, and possibly a very awkward mugshot that I would definitely frame and hang in my office as a reminder to never, ever ignore red flags again, no matter how good someone looks in a sundress. I texted Mrs. Henderson that I'd finished the job, cleaned up my tools, and headed out to my truck. As I drove back to my office, past the Starbucks where my card had never declined because I actually understood the concept of a budget, past the strip mall with the jewelry store where Tessa had probably started planning this whole scheme, past our house, our soon-to-be not our house, I felt something strange. I felt free. Sure, I was $53,000 poorer and my marriage was about to become a case study in what not to do when you're planning to commit fraud. But I also felt like I'd just woken up from a really long, really expensive nap where I'd been sleepwalking through my own life, ignoring all the signs that were practically waving neon flags in my face. I pulled into my office parking lot, killed the engine, and sat there for a minute, just breathing. Then I pulled out my phone, opened up a new note, and started documenting everything. Every charge. Every date. Every ridiculously overpriced item that Tessa had purchased with my business card. Because here's the thing about being a plumber who runs his own company. You learn real quick that documentation is everything. You learn that people will try to screw you over, that contracts matter, that every single receipt and email and text message could be the difference between getting paid and getting played. And Tessa, bless her designer bag-loving heart, had just handed me enough documentation to build a case that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. As I walked into my office, my assistant Danny looked up from his computer and immediately knew something was wrong. "Boss, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," I said, still smiling that probably concerning smile. "Just the itemized bill for my own funeral. But don't worry, I'm about to resurrect myself, and the ghost is going to be the one haunting a jail cell." Danny blinked. "What? Nothing. Just cancel my afternoon appointments. I've got some phone calls to make." "To who?" I looked at him, looked at my phone, looked at the statement that was still glowing on my screen like a beacon of betrayal. "My lawyer. My accountant. And possibly the FBI." "The FBI?" "Yeah," I said, heading into my office. Turns out my wife thinks I'm an ATM. Time to show her I'm actually a vault, and she just tried to rob it. You know what's worse than discovering your wife spent 53 grand on a shopping spree that would make a Kardashian blush? The phone call that comes after. The one where she has the audacity, no, the sheer cosmic nerve, to act like you're the crazy one for being upset about it. My phone rang at exactly 6:23 p.m. I was sitting in my office, surrounded by bank statements that I'd printed out because I'm old school like that, and also because there's something deeply satisfying about physically holding evidence of someone's stupidity. The name on my screen read Tessa Mobile, which was hilarious considering I was about 99% sure she was calling from Paris, probably from some cafe terrace overlooking the Eiffel Tower, sipping a $15 coffee that I'd technically paid for. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I wanted her to sweat a little, to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I'd finally seen the charges and was currently in the process of canceling every card, freezing every account, and changing the locks on our house. Which, to be fair, was absolutely on my to-do list, right between call lawyer and figure out if you can divorce someone via text message. On the 4th ring, I answered. Callum Ridgway speaking. Professional. Cold. The voice I use when contractors try to lowball me on commercial jobs. Cal? Baby? Is that how you answer the phone now? Her voice was sickeningly sweet, like artificial sweetener that leaves a weird aftertaste. She was using the baby voice. The one she busted out when she wanted something, or when she'd done something spectacularly wrong and was hoping I wouldn't notice. Depends on who's calling, I said, leaning back in my chair. If it's my wife, yeah, that's how I answer. If it's a thief who stole my credit card information, I typically let it go to voicemail and forward everything to the police. There was a pause. A beautiful, pregnant pause where I could practically hear her brain scrambling to figure out if I was joking or if I'd actually grown a spine in the 6 hours since she'd sent that ATM text. Okay, wow, someone's in a mood, she said, adding a little laugh that sounded faker than a $3 bill. Look, I know the charges probably look a bit high. A bit high, I interrupted, and I could feel my blood pressure doing that thing where it decides to audition for a rocket launch. Tessa, you spent $53,000 in one day. That's not a bit high. That's a down payment on a house. That's a new truck. That's my quarterly estimated taxes that I now don't have because you decided to roleplay as a trust fund kid in Paris. Okay, first of all, she said, and I could hear that edge creeping into her voice, the one that showed up whenever I dared to question her about anything. You're being dramatic. Second of all, you told me to treat myself. Remember? You said, Tessa, you work so hard. You deserve something nice. Those were your exact words. I sat up straight. I told you to treat yourself to a massage at that place on 5th Street that costs $80. Maybe get your nails done. I didn't tell you to bankrupt us and fly to a different continent. You said to spoil myself, she countered, and I swear I could hear her examining her new manicure through the phone. You didn't specify a price limit. I didn't specify a price limit. I was fully standing now, pacing around my office like a caged animal. Tessa, no reasonable human being hears treat yourself and thinks, oh, he must mean I should buy out Cartier and take a spontaneous vacation to France. That's not how normal people interpret basic conversation. Well, maybe you should have been more clear, she said, and her voice had shifted from sweet to condescending in about 3 seconds flat. It was the tone she used when she talked to me in front of her friends, the one that made me sound like I was some kind of idiot who couldn't tie his own shoes without written instructions. I was about to respond with something incredibly articulate and cutting when I heard another voice in the background. A male voice. A voice I recognized immediately because I'd known it for 15 years, had stood next to it at my own wedding, had trusted it like family. Tessa, who's that? I asked, even though I already knew. Oh, Kyle's here, she said casually, like it was totally normal for her brother to be in Paris with her on a trip I didn't know about. He says hi. Kyle, my buddy, my former best friend, the guy who'd asked me to make him my best man because we were basically brothers. The same Kyle who'd married my wife's sister 2 years ago, officially making us actual brothers-in-law, which I'd thought was cool at the time, but was now realizing was probably just making family gatherings infinitely more complicated. Put him on, I said. Cal, that's not necessary. Put him on. There was some shuffling, some whispered conversation I couldn't quite make out, and then Kyle's voice came through the line, all fake cheerfulness and bro energy. Yo, Callum. Man, how's it going? How's it going? I repeated slowly. Kyle, are you seriously in Paris right now with my wife, while I'm here looking at a credit card bill that could fund a small military operation? Dude, relax, he said, and I could hear him moving to somewhere quieter, probably stepping away from Tessa. Look, she told me you guys had discussed this trip. Anniversary gift, or whatever. She said you couldn't make it because of work, so she asked if I wanted to tag along so she wouldn't be alone. Brotherly protection, you know? I'm just here making sure she's safe. Brotherly protection, I said flatly. In Paris. First class. With $3,200 worth of jewelry and a $9,000 handbag. Hey man, I don't know about all that, Kyle said, and his voice had taken on that defensive tone that people use when they know they're caught, but are still trying to play innocent. I'm just here for moral support. She's been through a lot, you know? With your dad passing and everything. She said you've been distant, stressed out. She needed a break. And there it was. The nuclear option. Bringing up my father's death. My dad had passed away 4 months ago. Heart attack, sudden, devastating. And I'd been handling it the way most men handle grief. By working 70-hour weeks and pretending I was fine while slowly dying inside. Tessa had been supportive in the way that people are supportive when they're physically present but emotionally checked out. Bringing me casseroles I didn't eat and saying things like he's in a better place now while scrolling through Instagram. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I've been grieving my father, working my ass off to keep our business afloat and our bills paid. And your solution, Tessa's solution, was to spend $53,000 and fly to Paris with her brother for moral support. When you say it like that, it sounds bad, Kyle admitted. That's because it is bad, Kyle. I exploded. It's not just bad, it's insane. It's fraud. She used my business card, do you understand that? Not our joint account, not my personal card, my business card. The one that's connected to my company. The one that handles commercial accounts and government contracts. She didn't just rob me. She committed corporate fraud. There was silence on the other end. Long, heavy silence that told me Kyle was finally understanding the magnitude of what Tessa had done. Oh, he said quietly. Oh shit. Yeah, oh shit is right, I said. Put Tessa back on. More shuffling. Then Tessa's voice, sharper now, defensive. You're being ridiculous, Callum. You're not thinking straight. The grief, the stress. Maybe you told me I could use that card and you just don't remember. Have you considered that? I actually laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that happens when someone says something so unbelievably stupid that your brain short-circuits and laughter is the only response it can produce. I don't remember, I repeated. Tessa, I'm a business owner. I handle 6-figure contracts. I manage a dozen employees. I coordinate with city inspectors and general contractors and commercial clients. But sure, yeah, maybe I just forgot that I told my wife she could take a $53,000 vacation to Paris using my business account. That makes total sense. The stress has been affecting you, she insisted. Kyle, back me up here. Tell him about the grief stress thing. Kyle cleared his throat. I mean, Cal, grief can make people forget stuff. I read an article about it. Maybe you did say something and just don't remember? It happens, man. I stared at my office wall, at the framed licenses and permits, at the photo of me and my dad at my business launch 5 years ago, both of us grinning like idiots because we'd actually done it, actually built something from nothing. My dad, who'd taught me everything about plumbing, about business, about being a man who keeps his word and doesn't take shit from anyone. And here I was, taking shit from my wife and her brother, who were currently tag-teaming me from another continent, trying to gaslight me into believing I'd authorized my own financial ruin. You know what? I said quietly. You're absolutely right. I must be confused. The grief, the stress, it's all making me crazy. So let me clear my head and call you back. See? I knew you'd understand, Tessa said, relief flooding her voice. We can talk about this when I get back. I'll be home in a few days, and we'll sort everything out. Love you, babe. I hung up before she could hear my response, which was probably for the best because what I wanted to say would have gotten me arrested in about 47 states. I sat down at my desk, stared at my phone, and muttered to myself, confused? Sure, Confused about why I married a gold-digging raccoon with Wi-Fi. Then I added, and confused about why I ever trusted a guy whose idea of brotherly protection includes enabling felony fraud. My office felt too small suddenly, too quiet. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of the air conditioner, the distant sound of traffic outside. Normal sounds. The sounds of a normal Tuesday evening in a normal life. Except my life wasn't normal anymore. My life had become a country song written by someone with a law degree and a really dark sense of humor. I pulled up my contacts, scrolled to my lawyer's number, and hit call. It rang twice before Tom answered. Callum? Everything okay? Tom, I said. How do you feel about working late tonight? Because I need to discuss something involving corporate fraud, international travel, and the fact that my wife thinks I'm an ATM with amnesia. There was a pause. Then Tom said, I'll put on coffee. Get over here. I grabbed my keys, took one last look at those bank statements, and headed for the door. The war had officially begun. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and the main character walks into the obviously haunted basement, and you're screaming at the TV like, don't go down there, you absolute moron. Yeah, well, turns out I was that moron. Except my haunted basement was a marriage, and instead of ghosts, I got a wife who saw me as a walking, talking ATM with a pulse and a pension plan. Sitting in my truck outside Tom's office, waiting for him to finish brewing what he'd promised would be the strongest coffee known to man, I did something I should have done about 3 years ago. I actually thought about my marriage. Not the highlight reel version that I'd been telling myself, the one where Tessa and I were this perfect couple who'd overcome odds and built a life together. No, I thought about the actual, unfiltered, director's cut version with all the deleted scenes that my brain had been conveniently ignoring because acknowledging them would have meant admitting I'd made a catastrophically bad decision. Looking back, and I mean really looking back, without the rose-colored glasses that apparently cost me 53 grand, I should have known. There were signs. So many signs. Red flags waving so hard they could have powered a small wind farm. But did I pay attention? Did I trust my gut? Nope. I ignored every single one because I was too busy being a good husband and not wanting to rock the boat, and about 17 other cliches that basically translate to, I was a doormat with a bank account. Let me paint you a picture of the first sign I missed. About 2 years ago, maybe a little less, Tessa accidentally locked me out of my own Netflix account. My account, the one I'd been paying for since Netflix was still mailing DVDs like it was the Stone Age. I came home from a particularly brutal job. Some restaurant's entire sewage system had backed up, and I'd spent 8 hours in literal shit, and all I wanted was to take a shower and zone out to some mindless action movie. But no, my password didn't work. The email had been changed. The recovery phone number had been changed. It was like my Netflix account had entered witness protection without telling me. When I asked Tessa about it, she was sitting on our couch that I'd bought, in our house that I was paying the mortgage on, watching some reality show about rich people doing rich people things. She barely looked up. Oh yeah, I changed all that, she said casually, like she'd just told me she'd rearranged the spice cabinet. The profiles were all messed up, and your algorithm was recommending weird stuff. I needed a fresh start. A fresh start, I repeated. On my account. Our account, she corrected, finally glancing at me. We're married, Cal. What's yours is mine, remember? And here's where I should have said something. Here's where any person with half a functioning brain cell should have stood up and said, actually, no, that's not how this works. You don't just hijack someone's account and lock them out like you're staging a corporate coup. But did I say that? No, I said. Okay, can you at least give me the new password so I can watch something? She sighed like I'd asked her to explain quantum physics. I'll text it to you later. I'm in the middle of my show. She never texted me the password. I ended up creating a new profile on her Fresh Start account, and somehow, I was the bad guy for making things complicated. Looking back, that wasn't about Netflix. That was a test. She was testing how much she could take, how much I'd let slide, how far she could push before I actually pushed back. Spoiler alert, I never pushed back. Not then, anyway. Then there was the roommate incident. Oh, this one still makes my eye twitch. We were at her friend Madison's birthday party. Madison, who I'm pretty sure has never worked a day in her life, and whose idea of struggling is when the barista gets her oat milk order wrong. The whole crew was there. All of Tessa's friends from her yoga studio, all of them sipping wine that cost more per bottle than I charged for a basic service call. I was making small talk with Madison's husband, Derek, a finance bro who kept trying to explain cryptocurrency to me like I was 5 years old. Mid-conversation, I heard Tessa laughing across the patio. Loud, theatrical laughing. The kind that makes everyone turn and look. "Oh my God, no, that's my roommate," she said, gesturing toward me like I was a piece of furniture. "Cal, come here. Tell them the story about the guy with the goldfish in his toilet." Roommate. She called me her roommate. In front of a dozen people. At a party. I walked over, confused, thinking maybe I'd misheard. "You're what?" "My roommate," she repeated, grinning like it was the funniest thing in the world. "I was just telling everyone how we're basically roommates who share a house. Like friends, but with better plumbing." Everyone laughed. She laughed the hardest. I stood there, drink in hand, smile frozen on my face like some kind of deranged mannequin, and said, "We're married, Tess." "Oh my God, Cal, it's just a joke," she said, rolling her eyes. "Don't be so sensitive. Everyone knows we're married. I'm just saying we have a very modern relationship. Right, babe?" She patted my chest condescendingly, the way you'd pat a golden retriever who'd just done a trick. "Right?" I said, because what else could I say? Make a scene? Correct her in front of all her friends, and look like the uptight husband who can't take a joke? So I laughed it off, told the goldfish story that had nothing to do with anything, and spent the rest of the party wondering why my wife introducing me as her roommate felt like she'd just told everyone I was the help. Later, in the car, I brought it up. "Hey, the roommate thing was kind of weird." "Oh my God, you're not still on that." She was scrolling through Instagram, double-tapping photos of places she wanted to visit and things she wanted to buy. "It was a joke, Callum. JOK. You know, that thing people do when they're trying to have fun? Maybe you should try it sometime instead of being so serious about everything." And once again, I let it go, because I didn't want to be the guy who couldn't take a joke. I didn't want to be the insecure husband who got bent out of shape over one comment at a party. Except it wasn't just one comment. It was a pattern. A pattern I was too stupid, or too scared, or too damn tired to recognize. But wait, there's more. As they say on those late-night infomercials that I'd become intimately familiar with because I was sleeping on the couch about half the time by year 3 of our marriage. Our 5th anniversary. 5 years of marriage, which according to every tradition known to man is supposed to be wood or silverware or some other symbolic thing that represents stability and growth. I'd booked us a weekend at this nice bed and breakfast about 2 hours upstate. Nothing crazy expensive. I'm not an idiot with money, despite what recent events might suggest, but nice. Romantic. The kind of place with a fireplace and complimentary wine and those little chocolates on the pillows that Tessa loved. I'd also bought her a necklace. Simple, elegant, not too expensive, but not cheap either. Something she could wear every day and think of us, of our anniversary, of the life we were building together. I was actually excited about it. Like, genuinely happy to give it to her, which in hindsight is just depressing. We met at the house before driving up. I'd been working late finishing a commercial job, and she'd been at her yoga instructor training or lunch with friends or wherever she went during the days I was keeping our lives afloat. She walked in carrying a Tiffany's bag. A Tiffany's bag. That distinctive blue that's basically internationally recognized as someone just spent way too much money. "Hey babe," she said, kissing my cheek like nothing was unusual. "Ready to go?" I stared at the bag. "What's that?" "Oh, this." She pulled out a box. Opened it. Inside was a diamond tennis bracelet that probably cost more than I'd made the entire month. "My anniversary gift. Do you love it?" "Your anniversary gift," I said slowly. "That you bought yourself. At Tiffany's." "Well, yeah," she said, like I was being deliberately obtuse. "I saw it last week and fell in love with it. And I figured since it's our anniversary and you've been so busy with work, I'd just get it myself. You don't mind, right? I mean, you were going to get me something anyway." I held up the small box in my hand. The one with the necklace I'd carefully picked out and saved for. "I did get you something." She took it, opened it, looked at the necklace for approximately 3 seconds, and said, "Oh, that's sweet. It'll go great with casual outfits." Then she put on the tennis bracelet and admired it in the hallway mirror. "This one's definitely more my style, though." "Thanks, babe. Thanks, babe." Like I'd bought it. Like I'd walked into Tiffany's and dropped what I later found out was $4,800 on a bracelet. At dinner that weekend, When the couple at the next table complimented her on it, she smiled and said, "Thanks. Anniversary gift from my amazing husband." I didn't correct her. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, eating my overpriced salmon, realizing that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being her husband and started being her personal shopping account that occasionally got to sleep in the same bed. But here's the thing that really gets me. The thing that makes me want to go back in time and slap myself across the face with a frozen fish. I knew. Deep down, in that part of your brain that's honest even when you don't want it to be, I knew something was wrong. I knew the Netflix thing wasn't about profiles. I knew the roommate comment wasn't a joke. I knew buying yourself a $4,800 anniversary gift and attributing it to your spouse isn't normal behavior. I knew all of this, and I did nothing. I told myself I was being understanding, patient, modern, that I was secure enough in myself and my marriage that I didn't need to make a big deal out of every little thing. That Tessa was just being Tessa, and I'd known what I was getting into when I married her. Except I hadn't known. Or maybe I had known and just didn't want to admit it. Didn't want to admit that the woman I'd married didn't actually want a husband. She wanted a brand sponsor. A silent partner who funded her lifestyle and asked for nothing in return except the privilege of being called her husband at parties where she introduced me as her roommate. Tom knocked on my truck window, holding 2 mugs of coffee that looked strong enough to wake the dead. I got out, took one, and followed him inside. "You look like hell," he said. "I feel like I've been living in hell for 5 years and just now realized the thermostat was set to catastrophic divorce," I replied. He unlocked his office door. "Well, let's talk about how we're going to make sure she's the one who gets burned." I took a sip of coffee. It tasted like justice, if justice was incredibly bitter and probably going to give me heart palpitations. "Tom," I said, "let me tell you about all the signs I missed." Tom's office smelled like old law books, expensive leather, and the kind of desperation that only comes from lawyers who've seen everything and are still somehow surprised by human stupidity. He'd been my attorney for 7 years. Helped me incorporate the business, reviewed contracts, dealt with the occasional client who thought payment upon completion meant maybe I'll pay you never. Good guy, sharp as a tack. Also had a divorce about 3 years back that left him with what he called a finely tuned bullshit detector and trust issues that could fill a courtroom. We sat in his conference room, bank statements spread across the table like we were planning a heist instead of dealing with the aftermath of one. Tom had traded his coffee for whiskey about 20 minutes into my story, which I took as either a really bad sign or a really honest one. "Okay," he said, adjusting his glasses and peering at the statements. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Your wife spent $53,000 in one day, called you an ATM, is currently in Paris with her brother, and tried to convince you that you authorized all of this, but just don't remember because of grief-related memory loss." "That's the highlight reel, yeah," I said. "And you're sure this is your business card? Not your personal card, not a joint account?" "Positive. Look at the account number." I slid the statement closer to him and pointed. "That's the Ridgeway Innovations corporate account, the one we set up specifically for business expenses, vendor payments, equipment purchases, client entertainment within reasonable limits." Tom picked up the statement, held it up to the light like he was checking for counterfeit bills, and let out a low whistle. "Callum, do you understand what this means?" "It means I married a woman with champagne taste and a complete disregard for federal law. It means your wife didn't just steal from you," Tom said, setting down the statement. "She stole from a registered business entity, a company that handles government contracts. This isn't marital assets or community property or any of that gray area divorce stuff. This is corporate fraud. This is potentially wire fraud. This is the kind of thing that makes IRS agents wake up in the middle of the night smiling." I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. Part of me, the part that had married Tessa, that had loved her, that had believed we were building something together, felt sick. The other part, the part that was tired of being treated like a human credit card with feelings, felt something else entirely. Something that tasted a lot like vindication. "So what do we do?" I asked. "First, we document everything," Tom said, pulling out a legal pad. "And I mean everything. Every charge, every text message, every conversation. Then we get copies of your corporate registration, your articles of incorporation, proof that this is a legitimate business account with federal contracts. After that," he paused, looking at me seriously, After that, you need to decide how far you want to take this. What do you mean? I mean, Tom said slowly, that if we report this, if we go the criminal route, Tessa could be facing serious charges. Federal charges. This isn't a slap on the wrist and community service. This is potential prison time. So you need to ask yourself, do you want your pound of flesh, or do you want to destroy her completely? I thought about that. Really thought about it. About the Netflix account and the roommate comment and the anniversary bracelet. About every time she'd made me feel small or stupid or like I was lucky she'd chosen me instead of someone better. About that text message, love the gifts, ATM. I want her to understand that actions have consequences, I said finally. I want her to know that you can't just use people and expect them to smile and take it. I stopped, trying to find the right words. I want justice, whatever that looks like. Tom nodded. Then let's build a case that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. We worked for 3 hours. Tom took notes while I went through my phone, my emails, my files. Every interaction with Tessa over the past 6 months, laid out in chronological order. Every time she'd asked for access to accounts. Every time I'd said no, and she'd found a way anyway. And that's when I found it. The thing that changed everything from my wife is terrible with money to my wife is a calculating criminal who's been planning this for months. I was scrolling through my emails, looking for anything relevant, when I found a folder I didn't recognize. It was in my trash, dated from about 4 months ago, titled Account Access Request. I clicked on it. Inside were 3 emails, all from Tessa, all sent to my business account, all requesting to be added as an authorized user on my corporate credit card. The first one was friendly, casual. Hey babe, can you add me to your business card? Would be easier for me to grab office supplies when I'm out. Help you with business stuff. Love you. I'd responded. The business account is for business expenses only. If you need something for the house, use our joint account. The second email, sent a week later, was more insistent. Cal, seriously, it would just be easier. I'm trying to help. Why are you being difficult about this? My response, not being difficult. That account is for Ridgeway Innovations expenses only. Company policy. The third email was from 2 weeks after that. Subject line, fine. Just one word. Fine. I felt my stomach drop. Tom, look at this. He came around the desk, read over my shoulder. She asked for access. Multiple times. You said no. She did it anyway. But how? I asked. I never gave her authorization. I never added her to the account. How did she get the card? Tom sat down, drummed his fingers on the desk. Does she have access to your office? Your files. She's been to the office, I said slowly. She brought me lunch a few times. Picked me up when my truck was in the shop. Then it hit me. The filing cabinet. I keep the business cards in my filing cabinet. There's a spare in there in case mine gets damaged or lost. Was the filing cabinet locked? I closed my eyes. No. I mean, who locks filing cabinets in their own office? It's not like I thought someone was going to break in and steal my backup credit card to fund a trip to Paris. So she took the spare card, Tom said, activated it somehow, and has been using it without your knowledge. But the statements, I protested. I review the statements every month. I would have noticed charges before this. Tom picked up the bank statement again, flipped to the second page. Callum, when did you last review your business account statement? I thought about it. End of last month. Everything looked normal. And before that, the month before, I guess. I usually check them when they come in. Look at the address for the statements, Tom said, pointing. I looked. The mailing address wasn't my office. It wasn't even my home address. It was a P.O. box I didn't recognize. What the hell? I grabbed my laptop, logged into my business banking account. Sure enough, the mailing address had been changed 3 months ago. The email address for electronic statements had been changed too, to an email I'd never seen before. She rerouted your statements, Tom said quietly. She's been using the card for at least 3 months, probably longer, keeping the charges small enough that you wouldn't notice on a quick account balance check. Then she went big with the Paris trip. I scrolled through the transaction history, my hands shaking. 3 months of charges. Not all huge, but consistent. $300 here for a restaurant. $500 there for a spa day. $800 for a designer bag. She'd been careful, strategic, spacing them out so they didn't trigger fraud alerts, keeping them under the radar. Until Paris. Until she got comfortable, confident, cocky enough to think I'd never check or never care or just accept whatever story she fed me. This was planned, I said, my voice hollow. This wasn't impulse shopping or being bad with money. She planned this. Tom nodded. Look at the pattern. She asked for legitimate access. You denied it. So she stole the card and covered her tracks. That's premeditation. That's intent. He paused. That's exactly what we need to build a case. I kept scrolling, kept discovering. There were charges at restaurants I'd never been to, stores I'd never shopped at, services I'd never used. All of them in our city, all of them while I was at work, probably while I was up to my elbows in someone's broken pipes thinking my wife was at home, or at yoga, or doing literally anything except systematically robbing my business. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A charge from 2 months ago. $1,200 to a law office I didn't recognize. I clicked on it, did a quick Google search. Baxter and Associates. Family law. Tom leaned in. She consulted a divorce attorney. Using your business card. She paid for divorce consultation with my own money, I said slowly. To figure out how to divorce me and take more of my money. The irony is almost beautiful, Tom said. In a completely horrifying way. I closed my laptop before I threw it across the room. What else? What else am I going to find? A charge to a hitman? A payment to make me disappear? Let's not get dramatic, Tom said. But he didn't sound entirely convinced I was joking. I stood up, started pacing. 3 months, Tom. She's been stealing from my business for 3 months. While I was working 60-hour weeks trying to keep us afloat. While I was grieving my dad. While I was being the responsible one, the boring one. The one who paid the bills and kept the lights on and apparently funded my own wife's exit strategy. Sit down, Tom said firmly. Sit down and breathe. Getting angry doesn't help us right now. What helps us is using this anger productively. I sat, breathed. Felt that rage turn into something colder, sharper, more focused. She didn't want a husband, I said quietly. She wanted a mark. And I was too stupid to see it. You weren't stupid, Tom said. You were trusting. There's a difference. But now you know, and now we act. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling Janet at your accounting firm. We need a complete audit of that business account going back 6 months. Maybe longer. Every charge, every transaction, every penny. Then we need to talk to your bank about fraud claims and corporate theft. And then, I asked. Tom looked at me, and for the first time all night, he smiled. Not a happy smile. A predator's smile. The smile of a lawyer who'd just been handed a case, so airtight it might as well have come with a bow. And then, he said, we make a phone call to a very nice FBI agent I know who specializes in corporate fraud. And we watch your wife learn a very expensive lesson about the difference between a husband and an ATM. I looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Tessa was probably asleep in Paris, dreaming about whatever else she wanted to buy with money she'd stolen. Make the calls, I said. All of them. Tom raised his whiskey glass. To justice. I clinked my coffee mug against it. To watching someone finally get exactly what they deserve. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. Not even one of those half-sleep situations where you're technically unconscious, but your brain is still running like a hamster on a wheel made of anxiety and rage. I lay in bed. Well, technically the guest room bed, because sleeping in the bed I'd shared with Tessa felt like some kind of crime scene I shouldn't contaminate, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move across the popcorn texture that I'd always meant to scrape off but never got around to, thinking about absolutely everything and nothing all at once. By the time my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., I was already in the shower. Not just any shower, a full production shower. The kind where you actually scrub instead of just standing under the water questioning your life choices. I shaved. Not the lazy, good enough shave I'd been doing for the past few months, but an actual proper shave with shaving cream and aftershave and everything. I even flossed, which if you knew me, you'd understand was basically a declaration of war. I stood in front of my closet. Our closet, though Tessa's side had taken up about 75% of the space with clothes she'd bought using God knows what money, and pulled out a suit. Not my going to a funeral suit or my meeting with the bank suit. My good suit. The charcoal gray Tom Ford I'd bought 5 years ago when I landed my first major government contract. The one I'd worn maybe 3 times total because most days I was crawling under sinks, not sitting in boardrooms. I put it on. White shirt, crisp. Navy tie, perfectly knotted. I YouTubed it twice to make sure because I'll be damned if I was going to face this day with a crooked tie. Leather shoes I actually polished. Even put on the watch my dad gave me when I started the business. The one I'd stopped wearing because Tessa said it looked dated compared to the Apple Watch she'd wanted me to get. I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't see the guy who apologized for existing, who made himself smaller so his wife could feel bigger, who worked himself to death and accepted ATM as a term of endearment. I saw Callum Ridgway, CEO, the guy who'd built a company from his garage with nothing but a toolbox, a business loan, and the kind of stubborn determination that made other people nervous. The guy who'd negotiated contracts with general contractors who tried to lowball him and walked away with deals that made his competitors wonder what kind of magic he was working. The guy who'd turned a one-man plumbing operation into a company with 15 employees, 3 trucks, and contracts with the city, the county, and 2 federal buildings. That guy had been on vacation for about 3 years, apparently taking an extended sabbatical while his wife robbed him blind. But he was back now, and he was pissed. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, my phone, and the folder Tom had prepared last night. A beautiful collection of evidence that would make any prosecutor's heart sing, and headed out. I didn't eat breakfast, didn't grab coffee. I was running on pure adrenaline and the kind of righteous anger that probably could have powered a small city. I got to the office at 6:45 a.m., early enough that the parking lot was empty except for Danny's car. My assistant lived on coffee and arrived before God every morning, but late enough that I looked purposeful instead of unhinged. I sat in my truck for a minute, took a breath, and sent a text to my management team. Emergency meeting. Conference room. 8 a.m. Mandatory. Then I walked into my building. My building. The one with Ridgway Innovations on the sign out front. The one I'd sweated and bled for. The one that represented every late night, every skipped meal, every time I'd chosen work over sleep because I was building something that mattered. Danny looked up from his computer when I walked in, did a double take so dramatic he nearly spilled his coffee. Boss, is that you or did we hire a lawyer I don't know about? It's me, I said. Is Janet in yet? Janet's always in, Danny said, gesturing toward the accounting office. She got here at 6:30 muttering something about fraud and spreadsheets and possibly murder, though I'm hoping that last part was metaphorical. I walked to Janet's office, knocked once, and entered. Janet was exactly where Danny said she'd be, surrounded by printouts that looked like they'd been produced by a printer having an existential crisis. Her glasses were on her head, her coffee was the size of a small barrel, and she looked at me the way a general looks at a soldier returning from battle. Callum, she said. Sit down. We need to talk. I sat. She pushed a spreadsheet across her desk. It was color-coded, highlighted, and annotated with Janet's trademark precision that bordered on obsessive. I ran the audit you requested. Went back 6 months like Tom suggested. Want to know what I found? Hit me. Your wife has been systematically stealing from your business account for exactly 5 months and 12 days, Janet said, her voice flat. Total amount stolen, $87,000 for $132. I felt like I'd been punched. $87,000. $87,000, Janet confirmed. The Paris trip was just the grand finale. She's been running smaller charges for months. Restaurants, spas, shopping, and she flipped to another page. 3 payments to Baxter and Associates, a divorce attorney, consultation, retainer, and what appears to be payment for document preparation. She paid for her divorce lawyer with my business money, I said slowly. She paid for everything with your business money, Janet said. Callum, this isn't just theft. This is calculated, premeditated fraud. She changed your mailing address. She rerouted your email statements. She spaced out the charges to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. This woman isn't just bad with money. She's a criminal with a financial plan. I stared at the spreadsheet, at all those numbers, all those charges, all that money that could have gone to employee bonuses or new equipment or literally anything except funding my own wife's lifestyle and divorce preparation. What else? I asked, because at this point, I might as well hear it all. Janet pulled out another sheet. I found charges to a storage unit facility. Monthly payments for the past 4 months. I called them, claimed I was confirming account information. The unit's under her name, paid through your business account. A storage unit, I repeated. What's she storing? I don't know. But people don't rent storage units for fun, Janet said. My guess? She's been moving assets. Things she wants to keep in the divorce. Probably things she claimed were lost or broken or donated. I thought about the guest room, about how some of my stuff had been accidentally thrown out during her spring cleaning last year, about how family photos had disappeared because they didn't match the aesthetic she was going for, about how my dad's old toolbox, the one he'd given me when I started apprenticing, had vanished, and when I asked about it, Tessa said she thought I'd taken it to the office. She's been preparing to leave me for months, I said. While I was working, grieving, trying to keep everything together, she was planning her exit strategy and billing it to my company. Yep, Janet said. She wasn't one for sympathy or sugarcoating. It was one of the things I appreciated about her. So what are you going to do about it? I stood up, straightened my tie, and felt something click into place. Something cold and focused, and absolutely done with being walked on. I'm going to do what I should have done 3 years ago, I said. I'm going to stop being the nice guy, the understanding husband, the guy who doesn't rock the boat because he's afraid of making waves. I'm going to be Callum Ridgway, CEO of Ridgway Innovations, and I'm going to make her regret every single dollar she stole. Janet smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of an accountant who'd just been authorized to weaponize spreadsheets. Need any help? I need you to prepare a complete financial breakdown for the lawyers. Every charge, every theft, every fraudulent transaction. Make it so detailed that a jury could follow it with their eyes closed. And then, I paused. Freeze the card. All of them. Business and personal. Everything. Already done, Janet said. Tom called me at midnight. The moment you gave the word, I locked down every account connected to your name. Tessa's currently in Paris with a wallet full of cards that won't work. I felt a smile spreading across my face. And she doesn't know yet. Not unless she's tried to use one this morning, Janet confirmed. And when she does try, she's going to get a very polite message that says, "Card declined. Please contact your bank." And when she contacts the bank, they're going to tell her that the account holder has reported suspicious activity and all cards have been frozen pending investigation. Pending investigation, I repeated, savoring the words. That's beautiful, Janet. That's poetry. That's accounting, she said. But thank you. I headed to the conference room where my management team was gathering. Marcus, my operations manager. Sarah, who handled HR. Pete, my lead plumber, and the guy who'd been with me since the beginning. Danny, who'd already spread the word that something big was happening, judging by the nervous energy in the room. They all looked at me as I walked in, suit and tie, and probably an expression that suggested someone was about to get fired or promoted, or possibly both. Morning, I said, closing the door. Thanks for coming in on short notice. I'll keep this brief. You all know my wife, Tessa. Nods around the room. They'd met her at company events, holiday parties, the occasional lunch when she'd stopped by the office. She's been stealing from the company, I said. For 5 months. $87,000. Used the corporate card without authorization, forged documents, committed fraud. Silence. The kind of silence that happens when someone drops a bomb in the middle of a Tuesday morning meeting. Holy shit, Pete said finally. Holy shit is right. I agreed. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know. This is your company too. You work here, you've built this with me, and someone stole from all of us. But I want you to know, I looked at each of them. This doesn't affect your jobs. This doesn't affect operations. The company's fine. I'm fine. And she's going to pay back every penny plus legal fees plus whatever the court decides is appropriate for fraud. What do you need from us? Sarah asked. Nothing, I said. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep this company running. Because while I'm dealing with this, I need to know that Ridgway Innovations is in good hands. We've got your back, boss, Marcus said, and everyone nodded. I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been tight for years. These people, my people, they had my back. They always had. I'd just been too busy trying to save a marriage that was already dead to notice. All right, I said. Let's get to work. Danny, I need you to compile all company communications with Tessa. Sarah, pull any HR documents related to account access or corporate policies. Marcus, business as usual. Pete, you're with me. We've got a storage unit to visit. As everyone filed out, Pete hung back. Cal, you doing okay? Like really okay? I adjusted my cufflinks, another thing I hadn't worn in years, and smiled. Pete, I haven't been this okay in 5 years. Now let's go see what my lying, thieving, soon-to-be ex-wife has been hiding in a storage unit paid for with company money. This is either going to be really satisfying or really depressing, Pete said. Either way, I replied. It's going to be really expensive for her. The storage facility was one of those places that exists in every American city, but nobody really thinks about unless they're hiding something, moving, or in my case, about to discover just how deeply they've been screwed over. It was called Secure Space Storage, which was ironic considering nothing about my marriage had been secure for apparently half a decade, and it sat between a Dollar General and a car wash that looked like it hadn't washed a car since the Clinton administration. Pete and I pulled up in my truck at around 10 a.m. I called ahead, explained I was the person paying for Unit 247, gave them my business card information that matched their records, and asked if I could access it. The manager, a guy named Rick who sounded like he'd seen every episode of every crime show ever made and was deeply disappointed that his life wasn't more exciting, said sure, as long as I had ID and could prove I was paying the bills. You think she's got, like, bodies in there? Pete asked as we walked toward the main office. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if she had my dignity packed in a box labeled stuff Cal won't miss, I said. Rick turned out to be exactly what he sounded like. Mid-50s, cargo shorts despite it being November, and a ring of keys that could have unlocked a medieval castle. He looked at my ID, looked at me, looked at his computer, and nodded. Unit 247. Been paid up for 4 months. You're Mr. Ridgway. That's me. And you didn't know about this unit? Not until yesterday, I said. Rick made a face that suggested he'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Yeah, we get that a lot. Divorces, mostly. People hiding stuff. Had a guy last year whose wife stored his entire comic book collection and tried to sell it on eBay. Vintage Superman first editions. Worth like 200 grand. Did he get them back? Pete asked. Nope. She sold them before he found out. Judge said it was community property. Rick shrugged. Marriage is a scam, boys. I've been divorced 3 times. I know what I'm talking about. Inspiring, I said. Can we see the unit? Rick led us through a maze of orange doors, each one presumably hiding someone's secrets, failed businesses, or in one memorable case we passed, what appeared to be an entire inflatable Christmas decoration collection that had escaped from someone's garage. We stopped at Unit 247. Here you go, Rick said, unlocking the padlock. Want me to stick around? Nah, we're good, I said. Holler if you find anything crazy. I've got coffee in the office and nothing better to do. He wandered off, keys jangling. I looked at Pete. Pete looked at me. Then I grabbed the handle and rolled up the door. Oh, Pete said. Oh, wow. The unit wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. It was organized. Meticulously organized. Like someone had watched a YouTube video on how to store your stolen property like a professional criminal and taken notes. There were boxes. Labeled boxes. I walked over to the first one and read the label written in Tessa's handwriting. Kitchen. High value. I opened it. Inside was our wedding china. The set my grandmother had given us. The set Tessa had told me she'd accidentally broken and donated the remaining pieces because it was too painful to keep reminders of the broken ones. There it was. All of it. Not a single piece broken. She told me these were gone, I said quietly. Pete opened another box. Cal, this one says electronics. Inside were 2 laptops, an iPad, my dad's old camera that I'd been looking for since he died, and a watch I'd inherited from my uncle. All things Tessa had claimed were lost, stolen, or accidentally thrown out. I moved to the next stack. Collectibles. I opened it and found my baseball card collection from when I was a kid. The one my mom had saved. The one that had a rookie Mickey Mantle card worth about 15 grand on its own. The collection Tessa said had been ruined in a basement flood last year. There was no flood. There was never a flood. She'd just taken it and stored it here, probably planning to sell it all off after the divorce, and claimed she'd never seen it. This is premeditated, Pete said, looking around. This isn't just stealing. This is like Ocean's 11 level planning. I kept opening boxes. Photo albums, family photos she'd said didn't fit the aesthetic. My dad's toolbox, the one she claimed I'd taken to work. Jewelry that had belonged to my mother. Documents, titles, records. Everything valuable, everything sentimental, everything that was mine that she could get her hands on. Carefully packed and labeled, and hidden away like treasure she was planning to claim after she'd successfully erased me from my own life. In the corner was a filing box. I opened it and found folders. Lots of folders. I pulled one out labeled Financial Planning. Inside were printed bank statements. My bank statements, going back 2 years. Highlighted sections showing deposits, account balances, asset values. There were notes in the margins in her handwriting. Life insurance policy, $500K. Business valuation, approximately $2 million. Real estate equity, $340K. She'd been calculating my net worth, planning her take. There was even a folder labeled Post-Divorce Budget, with spreadsheets showing her projected lifestyle after she'd taken half of everything. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the folder labeled Power of Attorney Strategy. I opened it and felt my blood run cold. Inside were printed articles about elder care, cognitive decline, and how to obtain power of attorney for a spouse experiencing mental health issues. There were notes about my grief after my dad's death, observations about my stress levels and memory problems, a draft document giving Tessa full power of attorney over my personal and business affairs, with a note that said, target date, Christmas 2024. Pete, I said, my voice shaking. She wasn't just planning to rob me. She was planning to have me declared incompetent. She was going to take over everything. Pete looked at the documents over my shoulder and went pale. Holy hell, Cal. She was going to have you committed or something. Not committed, just declared unable to manage my own affairs due to grief and stress. Then she'd have full control of everything. My business, my accounts, my property. Everything. I kept reading. There were emails to her divorce lawyer discussing the strategy. Correspondence with a therapist about documenting my concerning behavior. All of it fake. All of it planned. All of it designed to paint me as someone who couldn't be trusted with his own life. I sat down on a box, trying to process what I was looking at. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just fraud. This was a complete dismantling of my entire existence, planned and executed with the precision of a military operation. She was going to erase me, I said quietly. Take everything I'd built, everything I'd inherited, everything that mattered, and make it hers. And I would have been powerless to stop it because legally, I'd have been declared incompetent to manage my own affairs. Pete pulled out his phone. I'm calling Tom, and maybe the cops, and possibly the FBI. This is beyond divorce lawyer territory. This is criminal conspiracy. I stood up, looked around at all the boxes, all the evidence, all the proof of just how thoroughly I'd been played. Take pictures, I said. Everything. Every box, every document, every label. Then call Tom. Tell him we need to meet. Today. Now. I pulled out my own phone. And then we're going to make sure Tessa's Paris vacation ends with a very different kind of French experience. The kind that involves extradition hearings and international fraud charges. You're scary when you're angry, Pete said, snapping photos. I'm not angry anymore, I said, and I meant it. The anger had burned away, leaving something colder and sharper behind. I'm just done being the punchline to someone else's joke. I looked at that power of attorney folder one more time, at all those plans to destroy me, and smiled. Time to show her what happens when you underestimate a plumber who knows how to read contracts. You know what's funny about revenge? And I mean actually funny, not that bitter, haha, my life is a dumpster fire, kind of funny. It's that the best revenge doesn't come from screaming or breaking things or doing something crazy that lands you on the news with a mugshot that your mother cries over. The best revenge is cold, calculated, and served with a smile so genuine that the person on the receiving end doesn't see it coming until it's way too late. That's what I was thinking about as I sat in our dining room. Soon to be just my dining room if things went according to plan, setting the table for what would definitely be the most expensive dinner Tessa ever ate. And she didn't even know it yet. It was Sunday, 5 days after I'd discovered the storage unit. 5 days after Tom had photographed every single piece of evidence, called his FBI contact, and started building a case that he said was so airtight it could survive in a vacuum. 5 days after I'd stopped being the understanding husband and became something else entirely. Tessa was due back from Paris in 3 hours. Her flight landed at 2 p.m. She'd get home around 3:30 p.m., and I'd texted her yesterday, playing the role of oblivious husband one last time, asking if she wanted to have a nice dinner when she got back. Just us. I missed you. We should talk. She'd responded with a string of heart emojis and can't wait, babe. I have so much to tell you about Paris. I bet she did. Probably all about the sights she'd seen with my brother-in-law Kyle, the restaurants she'd eaten at with my business credit card, the shopping she'd done with money she'd systematically stolen over 5 months. I was practically giddy with anticipation. I'd gone all out on the setup. Candles, the expensive ones from that boutique store downtown that smell like mahogany and ambition, or whatever marketing nonsense they'd printed on the label. Good plates, the ones we saved for company that Tessa insisted we buy because entertaining is important for your business image, Cal. Cloth napkins, the whole 9 yards. I'd even cooked. Well, cooked might be generous. I'd ordered from that Italian place Tessa loved, the one where pasta costs $30 a plate, and they act like they're doing you a favor by letting you eat there. Chicken marsala, her favorite. Caesar salad. Tiramisu for dessert. A bottle of wine that cost more than my first car payment. The total bill for this dinner? About $250. The look on her face when she realized what was about to happen? Priceless. Tom was on standby at his office, 3 blocks away. Janet had prepared a folder, color-coded, because Janet was nothing if not thorough, containing every piece of evidence we'd need. The FBI contact Tom had mentioned turned out to be a woman named Special Agent Rebecca Martinez, who'd reviewed our case and used words like textbook fraud and slam-dunk prosecution, with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for people watching their favorite sports team win a championship. I'd even invited someone else to this little dinner party, though Tessa didn't know it yet. Tom would be making a special appearance right around dessert time. Call it a surprise guest. Call it the entertainment portion of the evening. Call it whatever you want. I was calling it justice with a side of schadenfreude. I heard her car pull into the driveway at exactly 3:37 p.m. 7 minutes late, which was actually early for Tessa. I heard the trunk open. She'd probably bought half of Paris and was about to drag it all inside like some kind of luxury refugee. I heard her keys in the door. Then I heard her voice, bright and cheerful and completely unaware that her entire world was about to implode. Cal? Babe? I'm home. I walked into the foyer. She was standing there surrounded by shopping bags. Louis Vuitton, Hermes, Chanel, all the brands I couldn't spell 6 months ago, but could now identify on sight because I'd been reviewing fraudulent charges for days. She was wearing the Cartier necklace I'd technically paid for. Her hair was done. Her makeup was perfect. She looked like $1 million, which was ironic, considering she'd stolen about 1/10 of that from me. Hey, I said, opening my arms for a hug. She practically bounced over, threw her arms around me, and kissed my cheek. I missed you so much, she said, and if I didn't know better, I might have actually believed her. Paris was incredible. I took so many pictures. And Kyle says hi. He felt so bad that you couldn't come, but I told him you understood that work comes first. Work does come first, I agreed, smiling. How was the flight? Long, exhausting. First class is nice, but it's still like 10 hours in a plane, you know? She looked toward the dining room. Oh my God, did you cook? Are those candles? Cal, this is so sweet. Figured we should celebrate your return, I said. Plus, we should talk. You know, about us. About the future. Something flickered across her face. Just for a second. A flash of something that might have been concern or calculation, or maybe just gas from all those French pastries. But then it was gone, replaced by that smile she'd perfected. The one that had convinced me 4 years ago that she actually loved me instead of just loving my bank account. I'd love that, she said. Let me just freshen up real quick. Be down in 10. Take your time, I said. I'll pour the wine. She headed upstairs with her bags, and I went to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of wine, and added Tom's number to my recent calls list. 1 text, and he'd be here in 5 minutes. I was saving that text for the perfect moment. Tessa came back down wearing a dress I didn't recognize, probably new, probably expensive, probably purchased with my money, and sat down at the table like she was settling in for a romantic evening instead of walking into an ambush. This looks amazing, she said, taking a sip of wine. You ordered from Marcello's? Your favorite, I confirmed, sitting across from her. Only the best for my wife. We ate. We made small talk. She told me about Paris, the museums, the architecture, the cafe where she and Kyle had breakfast every morning. She showed me pictures on her phone, all of them carefully curated to look like a wholesome brother-sister trip and definitely not like a fraudulent vacation funded by corporate theft. I nodded, smiled, asked questions, played the part of the loving husband who was just happy to have her home. And all the while, I was watching her, really watching her, looking for signs of guilt, nervousness, awareness that something was wrong. But there was nothing. She was completely comfortable, completely confident, completely convinced that she'd gotten away with it. That's when I knew it was time. Tessa, I said, setting down my fork. I got you something. Her eyes lit up. Really? Cal, you didn't have to. Oh, but I did, I interrupted, pulling out the folder Janet had prepared. It was wrapped in a red ribbon, because I have a sense of humor about these things. Consider it a welcome home gift. She took the folder, looking confused but still smiling. What is this? Open it, I said, sitting back with my wine. I think you'll find it very interesting. She untied the ribbon, opened the folder, and I watched her face go through about 17 different emotions in the span of 5 seconds. Confusion, recognition, shock, fear, and finally, that calculating look I'd seen so many times but had always written off as her thinking face. Inside the folder was everything. Bank statements with her charges highlighted, screenshots of the emails where she'd asked for card access, photos from the storage unit, copies of the power of attorney documents, the divorce lawyer payments, the storage unit rental receipts, all of it, organized chronologically, annotated with dates and amounts, presented like the prosecution exhibit it was about to become. What is this? She asked, her voice suddenly much smaller. That, I said calmly, is a comprehensive breakdown of every dollar you've stolen from me over the past 5 months. $87,000 for $132, to be exact, plus interest, plus legal fees, plus whatever penalty the federal court decides is appropriate for corporate fraud. Her face went white, actually white, like someone had hit a switch and drained all the blood from her head. Cal, I can explain. Can you? I leaned forward. Can you explain the storage unit full of property you told me was lost, or broken, or donated? Can you explain paying your divorce lawyer with my business credit card? Can you explain the power of attorney scheme where you were planning to have me declared incompetent so you could take over everything I'd built? I don't. I wasn't. She was stammering now, and it was beautiful. You're misunderstanding. Those documents, they're not what they look like. They're exactly what they look like, I said. You've been systematically robbing me for months, Tessa, planning to divorce me, take everything, and leave me with nothing. The only problem, and this is really the kicker, is that you used my business card to do it. My corporate card, from my registered company that handles government contracts. I took a sip of wine, savored it, let the moment breathe. That's not marital assets, sweetheart. That's federal fraud, wire fraud, corporate theft, and about 6 other charges that Special Agent Martinez from the FBI is very excited to discuss with you. The FBI? Her voice cracked. Cal, you can't. You wouldn't. Oh, but I already did, I said. See, the thing about being married to a plumber is that you forget plumbers are actually really good at following pipes, tracing things back to their source, finding leaks. And you, my dear Tessa, have been leaking my money for 5 months straight. She stood up, knocking her chair back. You set me up? You invited me to dinner just to ambush me. I invited you to dinner to give you one last free meal, I corrected. Seems only fair. After all, you've been eating free meals on my dime for years. But this one, I gestured to the table. This one's special, because it's the last thing you're getting from me that doesn't come with a court order attached. She was shaking now, tears starting to form. The tears that used to work on me. The tears that used to make me apologize for things that weren't my fault. But I learned something over the past week. Some tears are real, and some tears are just another tool in a con artist's kit. Cal, please, she said. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll pay you back. You'll what? I asked. Give back the $87,000 you stole? Return all the property you hid in a storage unit? Unplan the scheme where you were going to have me declared incompetent and take over my life. Tessa, there's no counseling for fraud. There's no therapy for theft. There's just consequences. The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. Tom was nothing if not punctual. Who was that? Tessa asked, panic rising in her voice. That, I said, standing up and straightening my tie, is my lawyer. He's here to present you with 2 options. Option 1. You return every single item you stole, sign a confession admitting to fraud, and agree to pay restitution plus legal fees. Option 2. We let the authorities handle it, and you get to explain to a federal judge why you thought stealing from a government contractor was a good retirement plan. I walked to the door, let Tom in. He was carrying his briefcase and wearing that expression lawyers get when they know they're about to win. The expression that costs $400 an hour, but is totally worth it. Tessa, Tom said pleasantly, walking into the dining room. Nice to see you again. Love what you've done with your hair. Is that a Paris cut? Very chic. Now, let's talk about your imminent arrest, shall we? If there's one thing I've learned from years of dealing with backed-up toilets and burst pipes, it's that pressure has a way of revealing what something's really made of. Good pipes hold. Bad pipes crack. And people? Well, people either own up to their mistakes or they completely lose their minds in a dining room, while a lawyer calmly explains the difference between state and federal prison. Tessa chose option 3, which wasn't actually an option. A full-scale nuclear meltdown that would have been entertaining if it wasn't happening in my house, to my furniture, with my wine glass that she just threw across the room where it shattered against the wall I'd repainted last summer. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, and I mean screamed. The kind of scream that makes neighbors peer through their curtains and wonder if they should call the cops. "You OWE me. I gave you the best years of my life." Tom didn't even flinch. He just pulled out a chair, sat down, opened his briefcase, and started organizing documents like he was at a book club discussing a mildly interesting novel instead of watching a woman have a complete psychological break. "The best years of your life," I repeated slowly, still standing by the door in case she decided to throw something heavier than a wine glass. "Tessa, you spent the best years of your life systematically robbing me, lying to me, and planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could steal my business. Forgive me if I'm not feeling particularly grateful." "I never lied to you," she shot back, which was so objectively false that Tom actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a full laugh. "Mrs. Ridgway," Tom said, pulling out one of Janet's color-coded folders, "I have documented evidence of at least 47 distinct instances of fraud, theft, and deception over the past 5 months alone. That's not counting the 3 years before that where you were apparently just warming up. So when you say you never lied, what you mean is that you lied so consistently that you've convinced yourself it's the truth, which is fascinating from a psychological perspective, but unfortunately doesn't hold up in court." She turned on him, finger pointed like a weapon. "You don't know anything about our marriage, about what I've been through. Cal works all the time. He's never home, never pays attention to me. I was lonely." "Lonely," I said. "You were lonely. So you stole $87,000 and planned to take over my entire life. That's your defense? You were lonely. You don't understand." The tears were flowing now, mascara running down her face in those dramatic black streaks that would have been more effective if I didn't know they were just another performance. "After your dad died, you changed. You were distant, cold. You stopped caring about me, about us. I needed to protect myself." "Protect yourself," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "By stealing from my business. By hiding my family heirlooms in a storage unit. By consulting divorce lawyers on my dime. By literally planning to have me declared incompetent so you could take everything I'd built. That's not protecting yourself, Tessa. That's premeditated theft. That's fraud. I looked at Tom. What's the legal term? A really stupid crime spree documented with the kind of detail that makes prosecutors weep tears of joy." Tom supplied helpfully. "Also, several felonies. At least 6 that I can prove, probably more once the FBI finishes their investigation." "The FBI," Tessa whispered, and for a moment she looked like she might actually faint. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "Cal, you called the FBI on your own wife." "I called the FBI on a criminal who happens to be my wife," I corrected. "Big difference. And honestly, I didn't have much choice. When you steal from a company that has federal contracts, it stops being a domestic issue and starts being a federal crime. You did this to yourself." She stared at me, and I could see her brain working overtime, trying to find an angle, a way out, something she could say or do that would make this all go away. It was the same look she'd had when I'd caught her in smaller lies over the years. The "which story will work here" look that I'd been too stupid or too tired or too in love to recognize for what it was. "You have plenty of money," she said finally, switching tactics. "You don't even notice what's missing. The business is doing fine, The house is paid off. You have savings. Why are you being so petty about this? And there it was. The thing that had been bothering me, lurking under the surface of all of this. The fundamental disconnect between how she saw the world and how actual human beings with functioning moral compasses saw the world. Petty, I said softly. You think this is about the money? Of course it's about the money, she snapped. What else would it be about? I walked over to the table, picked up the folder with the power of attorney documents, and held it up. It's about this. It's about you planning to erase me. To take everything I am, everything I've built, everything my dad taught me and helped me create, and make it yours. It's about you looking at me not as a human being, not as your husband, not as someone you supposedly loved, but as an ATM, a thing, a resource to be exploited and discarded when you'd extracted everything of value. I set the folder down. You didn't just steal my money, Tessa. You tried to steal my life. And you did it with such cold, calculated precision that you documented every step. You made spreadsheets. You took notes. You built a timeline. You treated destroying me like a project, like something to check off a to-do list between yoga and brunch. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Maybe because there were no words that could possibly justify what she'd done. Or maybe because she was finally realizing that the charming smile and the fake tears weren't going to work this time. Tom cleared his throat. Mrs. Ridgway, I'm going to explain your situation very clearly, because I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about the severity of what you've done. You didn't just max out a credit card. You committed corporate fraud against a registered business entity. You used false pretenses to obtain and use a corporate credit card. You concealed your activities by redirecting statements and communications. You removed and concealed corporate assets. Yes, the items in the storage unit count as corporate assets because they were purchased or inherited by the primary shareholder. And you developed a scheme to obtain power of attorney through fraudulent means, which is elder abuse even though your husband isn't elderly, because the intent was to exploit perceived cognitive decline. He paused, letting that sink in. Any one of these would be serious. All of them together? You're looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Possibly more if the prosecutor decides to make an example of you. 5 to 10 years. Tessa's voice was barely a whisper now. That's insane. I didn't hurt anyone. I just spent some money. Some money, I said. $87,000. That you didn't earn. That you stole. From a company that employs 15 people whose livelihoods depend on that money being used for legitimate business purposes instead of funding your Paris vacation and shopping sprees. I pulled out my phone, opened up a photo. You remember Danny? My assistant. Kid's 23, working his way through night school, wants to be an engineer. His Christmas bonus this year was going to be $5,000. You know what it's going to be now? Nothing. Because that money went to your Hermes bag collection instead. I swiped to another photo. Marcus, my operations manager. His daughter has a college fund I've been contributing to. That contribution? Gone. Because you needed a spa day that cost $1,800. I swiped again. Pete, my lead plumber. The guy who's been with me since day one. I was going to give him a raise this quarter. 3%. It's not much, but it's something. Except now I can't. Because I'm spending that money on lawyers and accountants and trying to recover from the financial damage you caused. Tessa was crying in earnest now. Ugly crying. The kind where snot gets involved and your face turns blotchy. But I was past the point of caring. Past the point of sympathy. Past the point of being the nice guy who smoothed things over and made excuses for bad behavior. You didn't just hurt me. I continued. You hurt everyone who depends on my business. Everyone who trusted me to run this company responsibly. Everyone who believes that when you work hard and play by the rules, things will be okay. And you did it all without a second thought because in your world, only you matter. Only your wants, your needs, your lifestyle, your comfort. Tom stood up, placed a document on the table. This is a confession. It details every fraudulent charge, every theft, every deceptive act. If you sign it and agree to return all stolen property and pay full restitution plus legal fees and damages, we'll keep this civil. You'll still face consequences, but they'll be financial rather than criminal. If you refuse, he placed another document next to it. This is the complaint we'll file with the FBI and federal prosecutors. Your choice. Tessa looked at both documents like they were written in a language she didn't understand. What about Kyle? She asked suddenly. He was there. He benefited from the trip, doesn't he? Kyle's already given a statement. Tom interrupted. Turns out when faced with potential charges as an accessory to fraud, your brother had a sudden attack of honesty. He claims you told him the trip was authorized and that Callum knew about it. He's willing to testify to that effect, which means you're on your own. He threw me under the bus, she said, sounding genuinely shocked. Technically, you threw yourself under the bus, I corrected. Kyle just declined to jump under there with you. Can't say I blame him. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I think for the first time in our entire marriage, she actually saw me. Not as an ATM or a meal ticket or a convenient resource, but as a person she'd wronged, a person who was done. I never wanted it to be like this, she said quietly. Then you should have made different choices, I replied. You had every opportunity to be honest, to be a partner, to build something together instead of plotting to tear it apart. But you chose this. Every step of the way, you chose this. So now you get to live with the consequences. Tom pushed the confession toward her. Sign it, Mrs. Ridgway, because the alternative is a lot worse. She picked up the pen with a shaking hand. For a moment, I thought she might refuse, might throw one last tantrum, might try one more manipulation. But she didn't. She just signed her name, slowly, each letter looking like it physically hurt to write. There, she said, dropping the pen. Happy now. I picked up the document, looked at her signature, and felt absolutely nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no victory. Just tired. Bone-deep tired from years of being with someone who'd never actually seen me as human. No, I said honestly. But I'm getting there. The next 72 hours were a blur of lawyers, police reports, and watching Tessa experience what I can only describe as the world's most expensive reality check. She screamed, cried, begged, threatened, and finally, shut up and did what she was told. Every luxury item got returned. The Cartier bracelet, the Louis Vuitton bags, even the perfume from Paris, which honestly surprised me because I figured she'd at least try to keep the toiletries. But nope. Tom had been thorough in his documentation, and Tessa's lawyer, a different one this time, since she'd fired Baxter and Associates after realizing they'd kept records of everything, advised her that cooperation was her only shot at avoiding prison time. The storage unit got emptied. My grandmother's china came home. My dad's toolbox sat on my desk where it belonged. The baseball card collection went into a safe deposit box because I wasn't taking any more chances with people who thought, till death do us part, meant, till I successfully rob you blind. Then came the morning I'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating. Tuesday, 9 a.m. 2 police officers showed up at our house. My house, really, since Tessa had moved into her mother's place after signing the confession. I'd called them, told them everything, handed over the evidence. They were polite, professional, asked questions, took notes, and then said the magic words, "We'll need her to come to the station." I called Tessa, told her the police wanted to talk to her. She asked if I'd be there. No, I said. This is between you and the consequences of your actions. She was arrested that afternoon. Fraud, theft, identity misuse. They read her rights in her mother's driveway while neighbors watched and probably wondered what happened to that nice young couple who used to live on Maple Street. 6 months later, I was living in a downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, sipping coffee that didn't taste like resentment and regret. The divorce was finalized. The fraud case was closed. Tessa got probation, community service, and a criminal record that would follow her around like a very expensive shadow. She'd been quiet since the sentencing. No calls, no texts, no dramatic attempts at reconciliation. Last I heard through the grapevine, Kyle's wife, who'd apologized about 50 times for her brother's role in everything. Tessa was working retail and living with her mom. Apparently, having convicted fraudster on your resume doesn't open many doors in the professional world. Who knew? Meanwhile, Ridgway Innovations was thriving. I'd promoted Danny, given Marcus that raise he deserved, and taken Pete out for the steak dinner I'd promised him after the storage unit discovery. The employees got their Christmas bonuses. The company got new equipment. And I got therapy, because turns out being married to a criminal takes a toll on your mental health. I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, just coffee dates and dinners with women who had actual jobs and didn't view me as a mobile banking app. It was refreshing. Weird, but refreshing. When friends asked if I'd ever take Tessa back, I laughed. Take her back? I'm still waiting for her to Venmo me for that last dinner. Some nights, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights, and thought about everything that had happened. The theft, the lies, the betrayal. But mostly, I thought about the lesson: never ignore red flags, especially if they're wearing Gucci. And always, always keep your business and personal cards separate. I raised my coffee mug to my reflection. Here's to the greedy ones who teach us what we're really worth. Turns out, I was worth a hell of a lot more than an ATM.